you guys have 2 minutes to answer, okay? So that's kind of the time frame we're going with. And Elijah, you have the first question.
All right, so displacement is occurring at a rapid rate in the city and disproportionately affects Black, low-income communities, immigrants, and refugees. What strategies and tools do you propose to slow and reverse gentrification and displacement of these communities in our city?
Well, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Mark Solomon. I am here to ask for your support for Seattle City Council, District 2. And my ideas for reversing or slowing down displacement of our neighbors is to take advantage of the multi-family tax exemptions that are available to us, the multi-housing affordability program, so that we can keep rents low for the folks in our neighborhoods. Make sure that as we do up zones, as we do neighborhood improvements, that those who are most impacted by the potential of displacement can actually stay in the neighborhoods. We need to invest in more housing for our community and make sure that we are building affordable units and taking advantage of the different taxing mechanisms that we have available to us to ensure that our neighbors can stay in their homes and that the new development coming in, that those units are affordable for the long-term residents, for our immigrant families. And those tax incentives can help stabilize the rents for the folks in the community. And one of the emphasis that I want to stress is when a developer is going to come in and put in a building, rather than just having to set aside a 5% or 8% of affordable units in that building, I want to revisit MHA so that those set-asides increase to about 25% at a minimum for housing. Secondly, any fees that are paid into the Affordable Housing Fund where the developer decides to opt out of providing those units, I want those funds coming back into the district where those are earned. So if they're going to earn affordable housing fees in the district, those funds come back to build housing in the district as well.
Well, I can't see all of the back, so I'm going to stand up. Thank you for being here, everyone. I'm Tammy Morales. I'm running to represent District 2. For me, this race is about trying to build power in our communities so that we can build a shared prosperity in our city. That means that we need to democratize access to power and resources and wealth in the city. And the way we do that is by moving city land out of speculation and moving it into things like a community land trust. I would like to see us do that more so that our community, so that our neighbors, the folks who are on the ground doing this work, who know what the solutions are, actually have access to capital and have access to land. Because as we know, ownership of land is key. One of the things that I've been advocating for is a community development authority where we would shift city land, surplus land, into land trusts so that we have permanently affordable housing, not just rental, but also permanently affordable home ownership opportunities. And that we also have permanently affordable commercial space because, as you all know, our small businesses are getting pushed out of the city as well. So those are some of the things that I think we need to do. We need to shift land into community land trust. I also, for our small businesses, would like to see a definition in the city of a micro business, which would probably be, I'm going to say, 10, 20 businesses who would be eligible for B&O rebate because, as we know, small businesses are taxed the same rate as large businesses, and that's not fair for them. So there are a few different things we can do to help keep our businesses in the city, and then we also need more opportunity for home ownership and for a more affordable rental, and that's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars invested in building new housing in the city, particularly for working families and not just for folks who are making six figures at Amazon.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay. This is on. Okay. Making sure. Okay, over the past 5 years, communities have worked together to develop solutions such as the Equitable Development Initiative, which funds community-driven solutions to anti-displacement. Currently, the program is funded at $5 million per year through a tax on short-term rentals. but demand for funding is much higher, at closer to 20 million each year. Additionally, council committed in resolution 31870 to fund EDI at $20 million per year. Where do you propose to find the remaining $15 million annually to fund EDI?
So I've actually been asking this question of city council staff because I don't know why. For some reason, it seems that that funding has been capped at $5 million. I don't really know what the revenue is from the short-term rental tax, so I'm trying to figure out if it's only $5 million or if it's more. The bottom line is that the city council committed $20 million from the short-term rental tax, particularly for the Equitable Development Initiative. This was a project that I helped advocate for in coalition with many of our community-based organizations, because the whole point of this program is to finance the ground floor of development. There's plenty of money to finance the housing portion of projects, but that ground floor is where there just isn't money for. So that's the point of this project, which is why it's critical that we fully fund it at the $20 million. So my first question would be back to the council, or really back to the mayor, because it was her idea to take that $15 million out, is why is that money missing, and what do we need to do to put it back in? If that rental tax is generating the kind of revenue that we were expecting it to, then that money should be going back into the project it was intended to, so that projects like Africatown, like the Rainier Beach development project that I've been working on at RBAC, the senior center, the senior housing that they're trying to do at the Ethiopian Community Center. These are the kinds of projects that need to be funded, and if there isn't another source of funding for this, then we need to make sure that what was originally committed is actually used. And I think that this whole idea of committing to funding projects or funding programs in the city one year and then stripping that money out to backfill the general fund the next year is unethical, and I think it is deeply dismissive of all the work that has gone on in our communities to make sure that there is funding available for the projects that our communities have identified as a priority.
If there's a commitment for $20 million to go towards the Equitable Development Fund, we need to capture that money. And one way we can do it is taking advantage of what was done with the sale of the Mercer Mega Block. There's money identified in there that for home ownership, for small business development, for homeless services, and for support for small businesses. And I would advocate for making sure that the Equitable Development Fund is fully funded to support, these particular efforts that we have going on. And additionally, I want to take advantage of changes in state law that allow us to bond against sales tax revenue, so that we can retrieve some of those funds to provide for additional housing, for small business development, for small commercial space lease rates. It can be done with the existing funding that we have. We just need to have a better accounting of those fundings, making sure that it is equitable, that it does serve the folks that are actually in the community who are in jeopardy of being displaced, not only our homeowners, but our businesses as well. One of the projects that I've looked at is the Claremont, which is the Southeast Effective Development Project, where they have commercial spaces that are actually owned by the businesses that are in those spaces. So you have the housing up top, you have the commercial spaces down below where they're actually owned by the businesses. And this is a model that we can replicate throughout the city. And I definitely want to do that down in the south end, particularly in the Rainier Beach neighborhood, where we need to support our legacy businesses and provide them with the support and funding they need so they can succeed and stay and thrive.
A recent report said that the city needs $400 million per year to address the homeless/affordable housing crisis. Currently many viable projects like the Liberty Bank building and Plaza Roberto Mestas at El Centro on Beacon Hill will prevent displacement or forced to compete with a limited pool of funds from the Office of Housing. How do you propose getting funding to meet the actual demand? How will you get the funding to support more projects like the Liberty Bank building and Plaza Roberto Mestas at El Centro on Beacon Hill that are ready to go?
One of the ways that we do that is through public-private partnerships. We've seen that working in partnership between community organizations and our housing providers, we can actually get some units done quickly. There's a proposal that I've seen from the for-profit leaders of housing where they have a plan to build 4,000 units of affordable housing within 12 to 24 months through a combination of factors, by using land grants, by streamlining the permitting process, by adjusting how the utility hookups are done. I want to pursue those partnerships with community, with our corporate partners, with our philanthropy, with bonding against our sales tax revenue, as I mentioned before, and through the development of a public bank that we can use where the city can borrow against its own assets to build housing and provide for community development projects and housing projects to house the folks that we have in our community that are, in jeopardy of being displaced. So when I look at, Africatown as a project, when I look at the Phillips Square project, where city money was actually used to help put that co-op, or bring that co-op online. There are so many different ways we can do this, but it does mean we have to work in partnership with each other. And I've seen that those partnerships and those collaborations is how we actually get things done. And I believe that we can continue to do that using all the existing mechanisms that we have currently.
So when I say that we need to democratize access to resources and power and wealth, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. We have an Office of Housing that works really hard at getting their money out the door to build housing, but their budget is about $75 million a year to do that. The reports that we've seen for the last several years tell us that we need $400 million a year for the next 10 years to start to address our housing crisis in this city. That's because of the confluence of issues. The feds have disinvested for years. Our city housing policy has been focused on developer-driven, sort of open the floodgates to gentrification planning, and we need to put an end to that. The way we do that is by building more low-income housing, more workforce housing, more units for people who are working class, who are driving buses and working as baristas, and students trying to go to school, and parents who are downsizing. But we're not going to be able to pay for that by tinkering with department budgets and finding efficiencies. And it is the city's responsibility as our local government to intervene when the market has failed the most vulnerable in our community. So we can't rely on private corporations to do this. If it was easy, they would be doing it already. What we need is to tax big business in this city, those large corporations who are benefiting from the investments that our community has made in them. They need to be paying their fair share and contribute to the expansion of the infrastructure, the housing, fixing our sidewalks, helping keep our libraries open, making sure that our community has what it needs as a growing city, so that it isn't just the people who are moving here who benefit from the investment and the growth in this city, but that the folks who actually live here and are at risk of getting pushed out get to benefit. So I've been advocating all along for a progressive revenue in this city to make sure that we're taxing big business to help fund the kind of changes that we need and the infrastructure that we need so that we can make sure that our most vulnerable in our community can stay.
All right. In neighborhoods where displacement has already taken place, how do you plan to support former residents moving back to those areas?
By supporting efforts like Africatown, because you've shown it, you've done it. As somebody who grew up in the city, born and raised here, spent some of my formative years in the central area, I've seen the change from when I was a kid to what it was now. I remember what it was like at 23rd and Eastland, and right there in Jackson, because I grew up spent some time at 25th and Washington. So when I'm examining the Africatown example, I want to replicate that in other neighborhoods in the city. I want to replicate that community land trust in Columbia City, in Rainier Beach, in Hillman City, on Beacon Hill. So that, again, that our neighbors who have been displaced or are at threat of displacement can remain. And anytime we have new developments going in where people may be at risk of displacement, I actually want to use a community preference policy. Now, it may come into conflict with, fair housing laws, but I want folks who are living in the community to be able to stay, and those who have been displaced to be able to come back and have the opportunity, the first opportunity at being in those new developments. So I would have, I will advocate for more projects like Africatown to be replicated throughout our community, more of those partnerships, more of those collaborations that can make it happen with community input, because every development that we do needs to have not only community input, but it must be focused on racial equity and cultural sensitivity so that our communities and the character of our neighborhoods can be preserved.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is to continue to advocate, excuse me, for more community land trust so that we start to bring the costs down. I heard on the radio this morning somebody's freaked out because the housing prices in Seattle are falling and they're worried that, the catastrophe is coming. I think that's great news. I think it's great if our housing market starts to slow down. We need to make sure that we are protecting, particularly senior homeowners from getting pushed out with increased property taxes. We need to make sure that we are making it easier for folks to stay and making housing prices and land prices more modest and more reasonable. For the folks who have already been pushed out, I think we have to do a better job of affirmative marketing, which is making sure that if we are able to find them, that they get first dibs on affordable rental units, on home ownership opportunities that we can take advantage of, as well as making sure that they stay connected to their cultural anchors and the cultural institutions that they have here in South Seattle in the Central District. So making sure that we keep in touch. There are a lot of folks who are getting pushed out further and further, not just past Rainier Beach into Tukwila and Auburn and Kent, and so, but they still come to our community for their grocery stores and their religious. Have a way to get those folks back into our community and help them.
How do you plan to maximize community benefit on publicly owned properties?
So this is a tricky one because my understanding is that with a development project, the real leverage that the city has is if we give away something. We give away a street or we give away an alley. And that's where we have an opportunity to require something in return. I have been working with Councilmember O'Brien's office for a while to see if there's a way to expand that. But I do think that to the extent that we can require community benefits, that we set a standard, we set expectations of what we want as a community for any project that's coming in, we need to do that. One of the things that I've been advocating for is a displacement impact study so that when a project goes in for a permit, they have to demonstrate that their project is not going to push people out. It's not going to push out poor folks. It's not going to push out black and brown folks. And if it is, then they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to make that a more equitable project. The challenge is that we don't get to talk about racial equity anywhere in the design process. Whether you're talking about SEPA or design review or any of the other places, or permitting, any of the places along the way where the community might have an input into a development project, you start talking about racial equity and you're immediately shut down. Nope, that is not within the purview of this conversation. We only want to talk about landscaping and paint. And so I'm trying to figure out how we can start having that conversation about racial equity and about displacement somewhere in the development process. I'm not a land use attorney, and I've been told that what I'm suggesting is illegal, but I'm going to keep advocating for it and figure out if there is some way that we can do this, because we have to insert a conversation about racial equity and community benefits into every development project from now on.
Can you give me the question one more time, please?
How do you plan to maximize community benefit on publicly owned properties? So how do you How do you plan to maximize community benefit on publicly owned properties?
One, by involving community. And something that we've been talking about before is that anything that's going to be happening in the community needs to have community input at the forefront, not as an afterthought. And with many of the developments that we have going on and that we're seeing that are coming online now, it's already been rigged from way before. The developers have already decided what they're going to do with planning department, and the community is left out in the cold. So I want to reverse that process. I want to make sure that any community development has community input at the forefront, not as an afterthought. So when we're talking about using public lands, involving community in that conversation, what is that going to look like for you? Ensuring that we don't just talk about having a racial equity toolkit, that we actually use it. One of the concerns that I have regarding mandatory housing affordability is there was a racial equity toolkit applied to it, and it was for the most part ignored. That's unacceptable. When we look at equity, when we look at community involvement, again, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be at the forefront of everything we do. And when we're using city land, ensure that the uses of that city land are appropriate for that neighborhood, that the neighborhood is involved, and they are involved in the planning process. And yeah, the city does have a system set up where if you're using city land, there has to be a trade-off. But you know what? Maybe we can reverse that. Maybe we can make that a little bit cheaper. When we have some projects online right now where the city is leasing land at a rate of $1 a year to certain entities, why can't we do that when it comes to developing housing for the people in our community? There's a precedent for it. Let's follow that precedent so we can build housing for our people in our community.
Hundreds of billions of dollars have been created in Seattle. However, all communities are not participating, as recent articles have shown. How specifically will you significantly increase participation of underrepresented communities in the economy?
One of the ways that I will do that is actually go downtown to these organizations and say, look, my community needs jobs. You have jobs that need to be filled. Let's create those pipelines of opportunity. Let's start in our schools. Let's start early in our schools with mentoring programs, with entrepreneurship, with internships and apprenticeships to connect our young people to those high-paying jobs, to those economic opportunities, not only in tech, but also in the construction trades. Because we know that we have Sound Transit's going to have 60,000 jobs coming online in the next couple of years. 60,000. There's no reason why our young people in our community can't take advantage of that. But again, we need to build those pipelines. We need to make those connections. So I want to use the leverage of the office to talk to our folks downtown and say, come on, let's grow that workforce from within our own community. Let's connect our young people to those to those opportunities. Let's provide them with the chances that, rather than shipping in people from outside the community to fill those jobs, let's build them here. And there's no reason why we can't do it. But you need to be able to sit down and talk with folks and have an honest conversation in order to make that happen. You need to be willing to sit down and partner and say, look, how can we work together on this? You've got this, I want to connect my people to it, right? So that's how we do it. We work in partnership, we work in collaboration. We ensure that community has voice and community is involved. We bring all the stakeholders to the table because that's how we do it.
Sorry, I think I might be getting a cold. One of the things that I think is really important is that we restructure our Office of Economic Development. OED is really focused a lot on sort of key industries, key sectors, and doesn't really spend a lot of time thinking about how we grow a local resilient economy. How do we help our small businesses more? How do we make sure that our neighborhood commercial districts are really thriving? And so one of the things that I want to do is sort of shift their focus and restructure them so that they're really kind of laser focused, at least for the next 5 years, on anti-displacement strategies. What that means is coordinating better our different workforce development organizations, for example, the Seattle Jobs Initiative and the community colleges and the Workforce Development Council. These groups don't seem to be working together with a real strategic vision in mind for how they're going to do the things that we know our young people need, our underemployed folks need. So I want to look at how we can better coordinate those efforts so that we can provide more opportunities, whether it is good union apprenticeship programs, whether it is community college programs or other programs. I know down at the port they're talking about an aviation high school, a maritime high school, ways to connect young people into what we know are good, high-paying jobs. The pipe fitters start at $45 an hour for training, paid training and apprenticeship. So there's a lot we can do, but we need to be more coordinated and more strategic in how we start connecting people to resources. And I think restructuring the way the Office of Economic Development works is one of the strategies for starting to get there.
So African Americans have been in this central area for more than 140 years, but gentrification has drastically changed that. Do you support reparation initiatives to specifically address the harm done? And what specific initiatives do you propose and or have supported to address this issue?
Yes, I would support it. No, I haven't supported anything specifically that I know of. But the kinds of things that I think about are, for the B&O rebate that I was talking about, for example, we need to make sure that our Black-owned business, Native immigrant-owned businesses have access to capital. And we need to make sure that because those small businesses are marginal to begin with, that they aren't taxed at a burdensome rate the way the B&O structure works. We also know that our young people need better access to education. I mean, every system that our community, that our country operates in has been built on racism, right? Every system we have is a system of oppression. Housing, jobs, transportation, healthcare, education. And so we need to make sure that we are dismantling that racism in an intentional way. And we need to make sure that we are advocating for the kinds of access to capital, access to property, access to better education that is going to start to stem the tide. My theory of change in this campaign is to, one of the principles we're working on is repairing the harm done to Black and brown communities. And my theory of change is that if we start to see the racial wealth gap shrink in our community, that's how we'll know we're headed in the right direction, that all these other systems that have been so oppressive, that we're actually starting to make progress, because all those layers are the reason for this wealth disparity. And if we start to shrink that wealth disparity, we will know that we're on the right track with dismantling structural racism in every department and every system that we have in the city.
So you're going to have to give me that again. So racial or reparations. Do I support reparations for our community?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
basically. And what specific initiatives
For
have
Black
you
Americans?
either
Yes.
endorsed or that you feel can specifically address the issue?
Okay. And I actually have not worked directly on any issues that have come forward. I am looking forward to learning more about the efforts that are already going on and participating in that. Because, as has been said, there are systemic issues, and to say otherwise would be foolish. We know that we have not had Black folks haven't had the same access to capital as other communities. We know that it's been harder to be able to start a business, to own homes. My personal family experience is one of redlining. One of the reasons that my family built their house on Beacon Hill is because they weren't allowed to be in Seward Park. So I know that history. I know the history of this community because I am this community. So when we're talking about making sure we have access to capital, that includes home ownership, that includes business ownership, that includes making sure that we can actually get loans so that we can start those businesses. And I want to use the leverage of the offices that we have within the city to ensure that we do have access to loans and that we're not denied. That also means providing some support for our small businesses so that they can, through the small business development centers, where they can get technical assistance, assistance working on business plans, marketing plans. I want to use the Office of Economic Development for a business retention and expansion program, and I want to plus that up so that it will support our small businesses, and not only bring them up, but attract more businesses into the community. So entrepreneurs like this young man over here can have the access to capital that he needs to be able to employ more people, train more people, and have more success and thrive in our own communities.
Seattle voters have taxed themselves in the past, creating hundreds of millions of dollars. Even though the school board controls Seattle School District, or the Seattle School District, the city controls a levy to support our students' success, like renovating Rainier Beach High School. Just for example. How do you want to, but have not been effective in doing so, like Rainier Beach High School? How have you, or will you change this?
I was just at Rainier Beach High School earlier today, checking in to see how things were going with them. I had heard something about them, having a food shortage at one point. Figured out what was going on with that. But we know that Rainier Beach has a enrollment problem. They have, and one of the ways that we can address that I intend to address that, is to work with our Department of Education and Early Learning to tap into those, the education levy money. Continues to be an issue, and it continues to be an equity issue, and we have to address the economic inequity that we see in Southeast Seattle if we're going to achieve economic excellence or academic excellence for our students in Southeast Seattle.
Can I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Seattle voters have been taxed in the past, creating hundreds of millions of dollars. Even though the school board controls Seattle School District, the city controls the levy
on supporting our students rather than punishing them. And another idea is to try to use some of that money for college counselors. We don't have a lot of support for our young people in what the pathway is for getting to college. Financial aid is complicated, and how to apply and get scholarships. So I think supporting those efforts better is also important. But in general, I'd say that we just need to work at the state level to make sure that our schools are fully funded, because it is criminal what's happening in our schools, and we need to make sure that our young people have access to anti-racist discipline processes, that our teachers, our educators understand what it means not to use biased discipline, that we have a curriculum that is reflective of our cultures and our communities, that we have more teachers of color in our schools so that our young people have educators who look like them. There's a lot we can do to support families better with navigating the school system, making sure that they understand, providing mental health counselors and actual nurses at all of our schools. So there's a lot that needs to happen. The Families and Education Levy isn't going to be able to cover all of it, but I think we all need to make sure that we're advocating for our young people, and that's not just in the city, but happening at the state as well.
All right, thank you. Now you guys have the opportunity to ask one another one question, and the question needs to be asked within a minute time frame, and the answer needs to also stay within the 2-minute answer time frame. Go ahead, whoever would like to start first.
Okay, so Mark, you cite a lot of different policies as examples of the kind of work that you would like to do. Things like the Equitable Development Initiative, a public bank, changes to MHA. These are all policies that I've advocated for with different communities, organizations over the last several years at City Hall and have passed at City Hall. So can you give us an example of a policy that you have helped pass or advocate for at City Hall?
I find that interesting that you bring that up because I've been advocating for a public bank, for supporting small businesses, for increasing entrepreneurship and access to programs for youth since this campaign began. And I find it even interesting when we were at the forum the other night that a lot of the talking points that you brought up in terms of supporting small business and supporting law enforcement, supporting public safety are things I've been saying from the very beginning. So I just find that ironic that you're saying that these are all your policies when...
I didn't say in my policies. I said I worked in coalition.
Yes, and I've said that I work in coalition as well. And I've been working in coalition for 29 years, being a bridge between the community and the city to affect positive change. So in terms of policy, no, I haven't been on policy. I've been on the ground. I've been in the trenches doing the work. My goal to be on city council is to get on council to make policy changes to affect positive change for the people in this community, because I've seen that collaboration works. I have a history of bringing people together, and I have a history of tangible, real-world results of actually getting some things done. So we can talk about the problems that we have, or we can roll up our sleeves and get to work. And I'm ready to get to work.
Okay, Mark, do you have a question for Tammy?
The question I have is, you talk about building economic wealth in District 2. I want to know, who are you going to partner with to make that happen?
So building wealth means that we are talking to our neighbors and the coalition of folks that I've been mentioning and referencing. I've been working with South Core, which is a coalition of 23 community organizations for the last 5 or 6 years now. We've been working on the public bank and got it passed and have helped complete the feasibility study 2 years ago. So there are lots of organizations doing the work on the ground to make sure that we have a comprehensive anti-displacement agenda at City Hall. We've advocated for this for the last couple of years. MHA changes, the EDI, all of these are things that have come out of the conversations that we've had in community for the last several years. Those are the people who I will look to. They're the folks who are on the front line, working on the ground to make sure that our Black and brown neighbors have a say in the kind of economic development policies that are getting put forth. And they're the ones who are behind these kinds of ideas. So that's who I will work with. My door is going to be open to the folks who are most impacted. That's my commitment to the community, is that the decisions that I make won't be made in isolation. They're going to be made with me reaching out to the community, with the community who is impacted at the table, helping craft decisions, helping craft policy ideas, advocating alongside with them at City Hall, with my council colleagues and with the mayor, and making sure that that the policies that are being advocated are for the people and by the people, and not by the multi-billion dollar corporations who are trying to run this city.
All right, thank you very much. I will be asking you 1 to 2 questions from the audience. Due to time, we don't have a whole lot of time to ask a lot of questions from the audience, so I apologize in advance for that. With the position you would hold if elected, what do you feel you would have the greatest influence over that would have the most positive impact on the city? The South. City and South. Say what? With the position you would hold if elected, what do you feel you would have the greatest influence over that would have the most positive impact on the city or the South End?
And the South End. I'm trained as a planner. I don't know if I've said that yet. The work that I've always done is around community economic development. I've always worked on economic justice. And so I have, the council has been asking all of the candidates, what committee would you want if you win? And so I have said that I would want a community economic development committee comprised of the Office of Economic Development, the Office of Planning and Community Development, and the Department of Neighborhoods, because I really think those agencies together can have a dramatic impact on the displacement that's happening, but there has to be some leadership to help guide them to what that looks like, and that really makes sure that our communities are at the table when these conversations are happening. There's a lot that goes on in our neighborhoods with housing, but the Office of Economic Development is never there. I don't know why. And so I think that's a real gap, and I think that we can have those different departments working together strategically to make sure that we are stopping the displacement that's happening in our city.
I also believe that the biggest impact that the office could have is that on economic development, and that's why I keep saying that we need to be working in partnership with our large employers to provide those pipelines of opportunity for young people, to provide those supports for our neighborhood business districts, to ensure that they can stay in place and thrive. So my appeal is to look at those large employers, look at those folks downtown, and look at the opportunities they have for job creation, and make sure that those jobs are coming down to our community. So leveraging the power of the office, right? We want to support our neighborhood businesses. We want to preserve the character of our neighborhood businesses. We got to be talking to the big boys downtown to help those neighborhood businesses. We need to ensure that we've got funding for our businesses so they can stay in place and thrive and hire from within the community. So yes, economic opportunity for our community. I have lived through the displacement of our community. I want to stop it. I want to reverse that trend. And supporting the businesses in the central area, the Central Area Chamber of Commerce, who's trying to do some good work with the Rainier Valley Chamber of Commerce, trying to do some good work. Support those neighborhood businesses, and we can do that in partnership by making sure that they've got the funding and support from the larger organizations. And I'm not going to hide from the fact that yes, they support me. And they support me because they know that I can get the job done. And that's what I intend to do. I know it's probably going to come up, and I'll just address it. Amazon don't own me. No one owns me. I'm responsive to the community. And if that means that I work with them to provide jobs for us, then that's what I will do. If it means I sit down with them to provide opportunities for us, then that's what I will do.
Okay, just for sake of time, the next question, you guys will have 1 minute to answer. Washington State has the nation's unfairest tax system. Poor folks pay 16.8% of income in tax, local and state tax, while the wealthiest pay 1% to 2.4%. What do you suggest we do about this to make it more equitable? Also, what do you think of the $30 car tabs that everybody pays no matter their income?
We need to tax big business in order to deal with this upside down tax code. It's ridiculous that we have the worst tax structure, the most regressive tax structure in the country. And so I've been advocating for a few years now. I helped work with the coalition that passed the citywide income tax a couple years ago. That's in appeal. I don't know where we will end up with that. And I was an advocate for the progressive revenue tax that was that the city council passed unanimously last year. So I think that is the way to go. Until the state changes our tax structure, which they seem disinclined to do for now, I do think that the city has an option to do that. I've also advocated for mansion sales tax and for a vacancy tax. We have I think 1,600 vacant luxury units downtown, and we've got 12,000 people sleeping on the streets. So those vacant units need to be taxed if there's not going to be somebody living in them. There was another question. My time's up. I'm sorry, I forgot what the second part of it was.
The car tax. Oh, yes. Unfairest tax system with poor folks paying more than rich. And then what do you think about the $30 car tax?
So if you're referring to I-976, that is going to have tremendous negative ripple effects, throughout our system. So while I understand the idea behind the $30 car tax, the ripple effects for me are something that I can't get behind at this point. In terms of our tax system, yes, we do have the most upside down tax system of any state in the country. and we need to address that. One of the things I've advocated for a long time is a state income tax that's coupled with a reduction in property tax and a reduction in sales tax. That is going to be more equitable for, those of us who are on the ground, who are working for a living, who are union members, because again, it is not fair that we're paying a higher percentage of our income compared to those who are at the higher income levels and can afford to pay more. So, yeah, I am, in favor of looking at progressive revenues, challenging the state. Thank you very much.
All right, well, can we thank Tammy and Mark today? We have a 5-minute break here. Please feel free to get some water, shake your legs out. We do have an announcement. Everybody's invited to Assessor John Wilson. Okay.
Test. Hey, Diane.
Y'all killing it, man. Y'all killing it. I love it. Hey, man, vote, man. We get the message out. That's what I'm saying. That's what we need, bro.
Waiting on you, sound man. You ain't never trust nobody with a big ass purple Dell. You know what I'm saying?
Dying.
Turn this into a rap culture here in a bit.
Hey.
You been going to these forums and stuff?
Yeah, man.
Have you?
This is wild, bro.
It's a nice turnout today, though.
It is. It is.
Our people come up, man.
Hey, we show up.
It's the showdown at Africatown, man. Come on, man.
I love it.
You know?
I love it. Gotta get a little gritty.
Yeah, we always get it. All right, man. Now you messing with my light, huh?
I'm very exposed. Okay.
We're going through this camera right here.
Hey, what's going on? How you doing? I'm well. Good to see you.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about the comment, like, right? You did the same policy I was on the streets. And so, we're talking to that, I was like, there's a lot of human policy makers.
This is whack.
I just feel like maybe he doesn't know how to tie it together.
Yeah, it's fun.
I just think this makes it hard.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering what I was going to talk about for the break here, and then the so that's what I figured. I was going to talk about you guys. Yeah. Okay, we're ready?
Good.
So what are we doing, man? You taking my mic? Okay, what? You just want to use the one wireless? What do you want to do? We got to do something. We're running out of time, man.
Do this real quick. Slap this on.
All right.
Oh, okay.
We used these before. Didn't you use this? You
Yeah.
used this in the studio, huh?
Yeah.
All right, man. We'll just...
There we go. Let's get it how we live, man.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
still need to hold my mic. I need my brand.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
no
you need to
problem.
hold that, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just entangle this for you.
Yep. That's so good. Did we use these mics? Okay, what's up? Man, I'm gonna hold this and you guys crop my hand out the what you call. Let's go. We gotta go, man. We're on the clock. Huh? We're good? You streaming now? Okay, fantastic. What's up, everybody? It's Big O checking in from the Central Area Senior Center. You know, we're here for the showdown in Africatown, round one, the undercard. We're in District 3, so we call it the undercard. But I happen to see Seattle School Board director. You know, I'm always like, director for District 7, newly minted, newly seated, Brandon Hersey. How are you?
I'm well, man. I'm just happy to be in the space tonight and get the opportunity to share in this, opportunity for folks to hear what these candidates are all about, bro.
Okay, so the first thing we got to jump into now, because this is unique in our district here in District 3. And what's our district for school board?
Our district is District 7.
I mean, but the Central District, what's
the
up?
Central District, I think it's District 5, but I might be
Okay, so one thing that's unique about our district is we got the po' boy pop-up. And I seen a big old smile come on your face. You're like, yo, they got the po' boy here, man.
Yeah, man. You got to know, man, I'm from Mississippi, just 90 minutes outside of Louisiana, New Orleans, the birthplace of the po' boy. And ever since I moved here, I have not found a fire po' boy yet, but I think I just found my new one tonight. The po' boy pop-up has the best po' boys in the Pacific Northwest, hands down, man.
All right, now you see that there's a sterling endorsement here from Hersey. Now sticking our foot into the politics, so to speak, of why we're here. There was a question that came up for both the candidates, Tammy and Solomon there, Tammy Morales and Solomon, about the school board and what they would do, and talked about the hundreds of millions of dollars that are there and everything else, and Rainier Beach. Somebody talked about kids failing. Well, I know that you're new to office, but has anybody reached out to you?
Neither one has reached out to me yet.
Okay.
Say they have. And I was really interested in hearing what they had to say. I feel like for both candidates, the knowledge base was pseudo there. I feel like Tammy Morales really had a better understanding, and I appreciated her ideas more, especially when we're talking about the joint council and actually having better representation and communication between the school board and the city council. That's something that I advocated for on the campaign trail, so I'm excited to see, if she does win this seat, I'm excited to see that happen. But if we're talking about who has the better depth of knowledge, I think I got to give it to Tammy on that one.
Okay. And now something else that came up is an issue that we talked about before, which is the issue of school lunch and a lunch shortage. Yeah. And so it's been a few weeks, maybe a month since we talked. I know that you're new there into the school board. But, man, what's the discussion?
The discussion is we are in dire straits right now. If the situation in some schools have gotten better, but there are still schools on the south end where the lunch options are an egg and yogurt. And that's just not sustainable. We have to work not only with our city partners, but our state partners as well. And I'm talking about the council and the legislature, as well as our food suppliers, to make sure that a situation like this never happens again. Because our kids, especially in District 7, a lot of them depend on schools as their primary source of nutrition. We cannot mess this up. We've got to get this right.
Right. And so final question here is the director for District 7, you know what I'm saying, and the two candidates here representing, the district that you represent. Absolutely. How important is it for constituents in your district to get out and vote for either one of the candidates?
Absolutely. No matter who you support is critical, because we are in a position to where we have to figure out ways to break down the silos between the school board, the legislature, and the city council. And we have to elect candidates who are looking for opportunities to work together and who have proven track records of doing so. So it's incredibly important. If you want the nutrition in our schools to improve, you got to vote for city council, you got to vote for county council, you got to vote for the legislature, you got to fill out that ballot, and you got to get it in quick. Because these decisions are important, and they affect your kids, and they affect their lives too.
All right, fantastic. You heard it here first. The best po' boy pop-up is in the Central District. and Brandon Hersey, again, congratulations.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying, on your appointment, man, and we're looking forward to big and good things for you on the horizon.
I appreciate that, brother.
All right, bro.
Absolutely. Every time we talk, man. Hey.
Hey, DQ.
talking and the moderator with that camera over there. Okay? And because I think we were missing that element when they were talking. We were missing that. We were missing that element when they were talking before. The moderator. We weren't getting the moderator.
So, you two have 1 minute to introduce yourselves.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. As many of you know, last week, Amazon Corporation dumped $1 million in one day into the Chamber of Commerce PACs against myself and progressive candidates in other races. The billionaire and Republican-funded PACs have raised over $4 million to attempt a hostile corporate takeover of City Hall and subvert our city's democratic process. We need to fight back, and that is why it's important that our communities are engaging in the democratic discourse in this way. By building a powerful grassroots coalition, my office helped spearhead the fight to make Seattle the first major city with the $15 minimum wage, organizing renters. We've won landmark renters' rights, and we are now campaigning for rent control. Alongside the Indigenous community, we ended Columbus Day and ushered in Indigenous Peoples Day. My office is leading the way to bring the post office back into the Central District. And together we brought senior voices to City Hall, and we are now on our way to ensure the Central and Bird Bar are preserved in community ownership. But precisely because we have been so effective in winning progressive victories by building grassroots unity, big business and rich Republicans are determined to try and get progressives like myself out of City Hall. They are bankrolling my opponent by donating directly to his campaign and donating to the big PACs that are backing him. Therefore, what's at stake for us this year is who gets to run Seattle, big business and the Amazon executives, or ordinary people like ourselves. My campaign is fueled by donations from ordinary people, including 1,000 more donors from District 3 than my opponent, and I'm proud to have the support of many community leaders in our district and our city. The billionaires want to keep this city a corporate tax haven. We, on the other hand, want to end the lopsided tax system which penalizes small business owners, middle-class homeowners, retirees, and working people. We want to tax big business. We want to make sure we have a city that works for everyone. We need affordable housing for all, and we need to win a Green New Deal so that Seattle becomes a leader against climate change.
Hey everybody, my name is Egan O'Ryan. I am a fourth generation District 3 resident with deep ties to the community. In fact, my grandpa grew up just a couple blocks away from here. He went to the Coleman School, which is now the African American Museum, and went to Garfield, like I suspect a lot of you in this room. I'm best known for my work with Pride Fest, about saving that event back in 2007. I've been doing that for 12 years. But I actually bring a lot more to the table. As someone who in my 20s worked 3 minimum wage jobs just to make ends meet, I know a little bit about what it's like to be a worker in today's Seattle. And as someone who started 2 small businesses from the district, I know the headwinds that the small businesses face with high rents and with regulations and taxes. I'm running because I think we deserve a council member who will show up and represent all of District 3 and not not always be a way doing the business of some national party, doing some national movement away from here. We need someone who shows up and leads the committee work that they're supposed to do, because there's a lot of big challenges in this city, and I'm ready for those challenges. I have a very collaborative way of leadership. That's the way I built Pride Fest to the single largest festival day in all of Seattle, by working with small businesses, with large businesses, with government, with community leaders, and building capacity for those nonprofits in our community year-round. I'm proud to be supported by over a dozen unions, by small businesses, by LGBTQ leaders. I'm running because there's a lot of work to get done at City Hall, and I'm ready for the job.
Displacement is occurring at a rapid rate in the city and disproportionately affects blacks, low-income communities, immigrants, and refugees. The South End and CD have been known as the most diverse neighborhoods in the community, yet recently Seattle Times published statistics saying that it has become majority white as the cost of housing continues to rise. How do you propose addressing this issue, and how will you center those communities most affected in decision-making around housing, land use, and community development policies?
How do you want to do the questioning?
Guys, each get 90 seconds. We have to kind of mar it down a little just for sake of time.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. Yeah, there's no doubt that the displacement in the black community has gutted this community. It used to be majority black in the Central District, and now the black community makes up about 15% of the population. So I fully support efforts like what's going on with the Africatown Community Land Trust to bring people back into the community and stabilize those that are already here, to make sure that they keep the housing that they already have. In my work with the LGBTQ community, one of the signatures of my work is helping to build capacity with community organizations to let the community lead instead of having someone from the outside come in and tell them how they're supposed to save their community or what to do for economic development or how to keep their housing. I think that we can create the systems, we can create the funding so that we can fund Bird Bar, so that we can fund Africatown Community Land Trust, so that we can build capacity, make sure that the leaders in the community have everything they need. And here's the thing, I'm gonna show up and listen, and I'm gonna follow your lead. There's some incredible work being done by Viking and others in the community. I think that the Africatown Plaza and the Midtown Center going on at 23rd and Union is a game changer. We want to see more of that, but it's going to take the will from the city to be able to fund those community organizations that are doing the hard work.
In order to address the unprecedented displacement that is taking place in our community, we need strategies both for our families and for small businesses that are struggling, especially immigrant and people of color owned and LGBTQ owned. And as far as working families are concerned, in terms of residential displacement, we need to have broad, comprehensive, bold public policy in order to address the fact that rents are skyrocketing and that home ownership is basically out of reach of anybody, including the vast majority of the middle class. And that's why we have to recognize that the for-profit construction market, even though it is booming, has made housing more unaffordable, not less unaffordable, and we need public policy. We need citywide comprehensive rent control that will not affect small landlords in any adverse way, but will make sure that corporate landlords, property management corporations, the rapacious venture capitalists are not able to exploit and gouge our renters, and so that it works. Having rents stable allows housing to be stable. And we also need a massive expansion of publicly owned, affordable social housing. Affordable means if you're renting a publicly owned apartment, then you pay only 25% of your income, whatever that income is. It's the same model of the Liberty Bank building and Capitol Hill housing. However, it's a trickle of what we actually need. And to fund that, we need a tax on big business. And the first step to achieve anti-displacement is to make sure that this year in the election, we don't elect candidates who are bankrolled by the same corporate interests that are opposed to progressive taxes and the same corporate developers that are economically evicting our community.
Just like in the first round, we want to ask this. Over the past 5 years, communities have worked together to develop solutions such as the Equitable Development Initiative, which funds community-driven solutions to anti-displacement. Currently, the program is funded at $5 million per year through tax on short-term rentals, but demand for funding is much higher, closer to $20 million each year. Additionally, Council committed a resolution 31870 to fund EDI at $20 million per year. Where do you propose to find the remaining $15 million to annually fund EDI?
Well, the first step is something that was mentioned by a former candidate, Tammy Morales, in the former session. First of all, and this is what my office and other council offices, progressive council offices, we are partnering on is actually getting answers from the mayor's office, because the mayor's office, because they are accountable to big business and not ordinary people, have often been opaque in the information that they give. I mean, the communities that have been struggling to maintain the central in community ownership have direct experience of what I'm talking about, and that is why we need accountability from the mayor's office. But outside of that, even if we found 20 million, even if the mayor was able to account for those 15 million, let's be clear, the scale of the crisis in our city is so huge. It's a non-starter without having a city council and a mayor's office that is willing to stand with ordinary people and go against big business, even though they're opposing the tax on big business, that we fund the tax, we actually pass a tax on big business, on super wealthy households, so that we can actually get the funds going for equitable development. And I do want to say that, my opponent has continually said he's going to show up, he's going to listen, but he has missed 2 disability candidate forums. He has missed the Youth Consortium and Community Passageways and No New Youth Jail candidate forum. This Monday he missed the Housing and Homelessness candidate forum. We do need people who will show up. We don't need people who will say they show up and then they don't show up. And it's not just about showing up and listening, it's about fighting for marginalized communities. You can listen and yet speak with in 2 sides of your mouth. We need people who will listen and then have the courage to act despite opposition from powerful forces.
So first of all, on EDI, and then I'll go ahead and unpack a little bit of the rest of that. And that is, there's a lot of progressive, we should only be getting those funds from progressive sources. And if we're trying to create equitable development, who is doing the best in this town? It's the wealthy and the large corporations. So I did support the high earners income tax that I know Councilmember Sawant championed. I support that as well. The progressive revenue tax as well. I think that when we're dealing with housing and development, I think we should be looking at where there are places where we can tax housing. So the vacancy tax, 1 out of every 10 apartments in the city is vacant right now. And if we can tax that and make and force those property owners to either give that money so that we can use that for housing for people that can't afford it, or to fill it at below market rates so that we can utilize those spaces for people that actually need housing. During this cycle, there has been several forums that Councilmember Sawant has also missed. She missed the biggest one in the general election and the biggest one in the primary. So it's sort of a false thing to call out. I think what you're more interested in, you're paying the council member to do a job. And in the biggest crisis that we have right now around homelessness and around displacement, it's her committee that manages that, the Human Services Committee, and she canceled nearly half of those meetings, the worst record of any council member. So those are the absences that you should be counting, not missing a couple of forums. They were very important forums, but campaigns are very busy and there's lots of different events going on. There's no excuse. I've connected with those communities directly. But anyways, that's it.
Thank you. How do you plan to maximize, sorry, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? All right. How do you plan to maximize community benefit on publicly owned properties?
Yeah, I think this is something that came up with Mercer Mega Block when that was being sold. There was a deal that was in the works that would have 174 affordable housing units that were built on site, while the $150+ million that the city would get would go back into the general fund to be used for other projects. And I think that when there are community-held lands that we are selling, we need to make sure that we're in the middle of a housing crisis, that we are using those funds to make sure that we can provide as much affordable housing for as many people as possible. That $150+ million, that would have bought a lot of affordable housing for people who need housing in this city. So I think when we're looking at things that we share in common as a city, we need to maximize what we get out of that, so that we can help people stay in place and help people come back who want to live in the city.
Very early on in my first term, the city was debating whether or not a new Whole Foods could be situated in West Seattle, and that had many thorny issues because Whole Foods, and now since then it's been bought up by Amazon, but Whole Foods has had a long track record of being anti-union, and now under Amazon it has become even worse. Now Jeff Bezos is denying healthcare benefits for part-time workers. So at that time, there was a robust discussion that Councilmember O'Brien and I led, and in identifying, in declaring that the public benefit that the city gets out of these projects is actually a very, it's like a sliver of what it actually needs to be. And we have ideas of how we can expand that. But it's not going to happen with elected officials saying, okay, I'll do this, I've got this. No, the only way we are going to be able to change anything is for the broader community to get involved in a coalition, and that's the only way we want the $15 minimum wage. That's the only way we have done any progressive measures involved. We also need to fight for corporate developer impact fees. We do need to fight for the vacancy tax, but all of these policies are bitterly opposed by corporate real estate and big business in general, and you can bet Amazon is going to be opposed to it. And that is why we need a city council that is not bought up by the same big business interests that are opposed to the structural changes that we need to make in terms of both community benefits and then overall thing. The other thing we've heard from many black-owned small businesses is that one of the things that is a real strike against the ability to set up new businesses and maintain them is that the square footage on the ground floor of new developments is given up in big chunks so that only chains like Starbucks and so on can afford it. We need to have a law that allows smaller square footage so that small businesses can be encouraged and local businesses can thrive.
Okay, thank you. The image. And I want to just say that this did come from one of our community partners, Keep Your Habitat, Ruby Holland, who's here in the audience. Thank you, Ruby. The MHA targets communities of color, expecting them to give up their homes, while other communities like Mount Baker, Montlake, Magnolia, and Laurelhurst are not. How will you make the MHA more fair and equitable, and what anti-displacement plans do you have to keep homeowners in place?
Thank you for asking this question, and thank you to Ms. Holland, who has been a fierce advocate for retiree homeowners and ordinary people as a whole, and really highlighting the complete injustice of the regressive tax system that we have, which forces the disproportionate burden of tax on small homeowners, and it really hits hard retirees who are living on fixed income. And if you look at the MHA program, there's been a lot of, there's a lot of myths and confusion about what it actually did. In my view, as an economist, the biggest victory that corporate developers won through the MHA program is not that it ended up really greatly increasing density. It is increasing density, and it's important for us to increase density because we are in a sustainability and climate change crisis. However, the biggest victory that corporate developers got from MHA was the shutting down of public conversation on what is actually going to be needed for affordability, which is, first of all, addressing the lopsided tax system and making sure that big developers and big business pay the taxes and ending this drudgery of property taxes that falls on ordinary people. Furthermore, the actual affordability that we need, and that the MHA was touted as something affordable, and I voted yes on it because on the whole it does provide a little bit of affordability, but it also is deeply lopsided. And one of the reasons it's lopsided is that it actually does not provide the kind of affordability we need. It's a real sliver, and actually the calculations from MHA are not their gross calculations, not net calculations, meaning they never tell you how much affordable housing was lost by the hemorrhaging of existing affordable housing, by housing being torn down, and then luxury units being built up. There's no number to calculate that. And that's why the real way we can oppose this MHA is to unite homeowners and renters together, not being against each other, but together, because our common adversary is big business and corporate developers who have been pillaging our city.
So if I'd been around to chime in on MHA on council, I would have made some changes there, because I think there are places where you have blocks where you, as Councilmember Sawant said, where you're tearing down more affordable housing than what you're putting up. And MHA is all in the details. It's really a block-by-block examination of how we're rebuilding mainly the most dense parts of our neighborhoods. I agree with the overall objective of it, that in those places that are already dense, create more density. But there's no doubt that we could do better. And the next council is going to have a chance to review MHA, is going to have a chance to review the percentages of affordable housing that we get out of that, and see if the in-lieu fee and the building on site, if that is happening the way that it was projected with the 50-50 split. So it's going to be really important to go back and revisit that and make sure that we get that right, to squeeze as much affordable housing out of MHA as possible. And to answer your second question about keeping homeowners in place, I think that we need to have for both renters and for homeowners, an emergency fund to help people bridge a job loss or a family emergency. I think there was also an opportunity lost in the backyard cottage bill, where we could have helped to provide capital so that folks who are at risk of losing their house could actually build a backyard cottage or redo an ADU. They could generate more income so that they could actually stay in the housing they already have.
Thank you. Do you support Fire Station 6 being repurposed as William Grove Center for an innovation hub as designed by the Equitable Development Initiative Plan?
Yes, actually, we need to have more of these spaces in our community, and let me just give a shout out also here to the Central, which is really a diamond in this neighborhood. It's a place where we gather. Just in this election alone, we've been here 4 times, and the city made a promise to keep this, to give this to the community, and the city and the mayor seem to be going back on their word. We need to put more pressure on so that it remains a place where the community gathers for important forums like this, and is put into community hands so that you can utilize it as you want, as a gathering place, as a celebration place that stays in the community for generations to come. But yeah, we need more places like Firehouse 6 where folks can gather as opportunity hubs, so that and not just that and not just this, but let's create more community spaces. I think that when we have more connected communities, that we are stronger, that the community's voice is heard, not only locally, but at City Hall, so we can make sure that our communities are getting the things they need.
Absolutely, I strongly support that. And in fact, we need much more of that. And what we're facing is a dual question. One is, how do we protect the community spaces that we already have in the community and not let them be taken by corporate developers, and then, so that they can make millions of dollars in profit by flipping it? And then how can we make more spaces available for the community as a whole? And one of the lessons we have learned from the struggle of the Central Area Senior Center in Bird Bar Place is that it is impossible, nearly impossible, to make sure that the community wins out in the end if we don't get collectively organized. And the only way we have made progress on the Central question of community ownership of the Central is because seniors in the community and ordinary people in the community got organized under the leadership of Diane and others, who are community leaders, and we brought our collective voices to City Hall in my committee, which my opponent falsely claims, even though he knows it's false, because the stranger has reported on it, that I have supposedly canceled half my committees. I have not. Actually, I have a long track record of bringing community to City Hall or holding communities in the after hours and in District 3, because we know that community voices are really important. And it was by the partnership of my office through my Committee of Equitable Development and the Central, the Bird Bar Place, Squire Park Community Council, Leshai Community Council, Africatown, and the Central Area Chamber of Commerce. We brought all of these organizations and 100 seniors, mostly African American women and really feisty women, who came to City Hall and chanted, "No more delays." They were telling the mayor, "No more delays." They went up to the 7th floor and chanted, "No more delays." And it was through that organizing, and many of you were there actually that day with me, it was through that organizing that it finally put pressure on the mayor enough so that we got a little bit of understanding of what paperwork we would need to file. And but the lack of transparency also needs to be analyzed. Why is it that the mayor and successive mayoral administrations have been an obstacle to this? It's not because they have some random hatred of this or that community member. Look at the view in the daytime. I mean, this is the $10 million view. Corporate developers want to take whatever. Sorry.
Okay, so you guys, the King County record site sits at the intersection of the Central District and Chinatown International District. The site has been made available for redevelopment by King County, Seattle Housing Authority, and the City of Seattle funding. Do you support equitable participation for the Black community in this publicly funded project as a strategy to mitigate displacement?
Absolutely supported. And in fact, in order to have the equitable development, we have to make sure we bring Black and brown-owned small businesses and prospective small businesses and ordinary people together so that we can win that space and also more spaces. And it's important that you're asking a question about the Central District and the Chinatown International District, because we've seen gentrification really systematically happen sort of more in the north end, and now it's moving south. And you can see the process that has systematically happened in the Central District now happening in the Chinatown International District. And it is really disturbing to me that we have candidates this year who say that it's actually not even a problem. When we had an action to protect spaces in the Chinatown International District for Asian American communities, I wrote an op-ed that said that we need to fight against gentrification, and unfortunately my opponent responded to that on social media by saying, well, we should not create problems that don't exist. Well, actually, gentrification is the problem that we are facing in our community, and we need a systematic effort against it, and we need elected representatives who will be on our side and not on the side of corporate developers. And it's enough of lip service on these issues. We actually need council members who will push for this, and we have shown through my office, through Councilmember Mosqueda, Herbold, O'Brien, and others, we have shown that there is commitment to push for this, but it can't be done unless we have community that is organized. We saw what happened with the repeal of the Amazon tax or the head tax last year. Even well-meaning elected representatives sometimes will feel the pressure and fold their tent, and in order to prevent that, we need a vigilant community that is organized and has the strength to hold all our representatives accountable, including myself. We should not buy into this messiah theory that any one person is going to do it. It's going to be through community action.
Yes, I support that. We need to have more spaces where we can have equitable development. And if we're going to have housing that folks can either stay in community or return after having been displaced entirely from the city, we're going to have to do more than just have affordable housing. We're going to have business space for Black business owners. And, as a small business advocate and as someone that has started 2 small businesses from the district, I know the importance of this. And you all know from the communities you live in, you love your small businesses. But they're not going to start magically. If you're a small business owner and you are low income, it is going to be incredibly difficult for you to start that small business. So we need to help small businesses start by access to capital. And whether that's through grants or through a public bank, that is one essential piece of that. But not only that, we also need programs that the city, the county, the state can provide to help support the development of those new businesses so they actually have a chance to thrive. So it's not enough to have housing, we actually have to have opportunity as well, whether that's through union jobs or through good tech work or through small businesses. We need both of those things to happen at the same time.
House Bill 1918, which recently passed unanimously through redlining, weed and seed, divestment, and public and private practices, which is a racist practice. Do you support reparation initiatives to address the harm that has been done? What initiatives do you propose and have supported to address these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in support. This started long ago. I don't have to tell the black community in the Central District and the South End about this, but racist housing policies in the 50s and 60s redline the black community to specific neighborhoods. And if you walk around the Central District, you'll see that there are some small apartment buildings, some duplexes and triplexes that racist housing policy then outlawed from that point forward. It was only going to be single family homes, and only certain people could live in certain communities. So absolutely, I support reparations. And I would want the community to lead on that, and I'll follow. But I imagine it is supporting projects like we see with the Africatown Plaza, Midtown Center, and many more projects like that I know are going to be coming down the pike as we see how successful those are and how we're able to bring black folks back into the Central District and then give and create the systems by which people can thrive in those neighborhoods. I think that's essential.
As an immigrant woman of color who has spent several years helping build struggles for marginalized communities, I absolutely support reparations. I think the brutal legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, and the ongoing racism in our society, institutional racism that is built into capitalism DNA, needs to be addressed in a deep way, and it has to be addressed in a structural way. And so there are already many ideas in the community. These are not ideas I invented, but just to go over some of them, we need to make sure that all the tremendous amounts of publicly owned land that in our city, in our region, should be prioritized for making sure that we have affordable housing and small business and other community and art spaces for the marginalized communities, the historically marginalized communities. And in order to make that happen, we need resources, and for that we need a public bank. And we have made progress towards that through my office and through indigenous communities, and in the environmental community we passed the Wells Fargo divestment ordinance. But in order to transition from that to an actual public bank, we have to take certain steps. Tammy mentioned we have carried out a study that we sponsored through my office. That study has come out and it's very positive. We need to undertake some steps, but it can be done. But we need political will on the council in order to make that happen. We also need to tax big business. Taxing big business and preventing displacement are reparation strategies, because it is only through expanding public revenues in the scale that we will need in Seattle that we will be able to build affordable housing for our communities. And we also need to make sure that we have a race and social justice lens. On 23rd and Union, at the same corner that our black and brown youth used to be arrested for minor offenses, at the same corner, a white multimillionaire is making giant profits through a marijuana store. I think that is a symbol, that's such a life symbol of what is wrong in our society, and we need to address that.
All right, thank you so much. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been created in Seattle. However, all communities are not participating, as numerous articles have shown. Black communities are not participating in the technology sectors, construction, or small businesses. What will be your strategy to change this?
I'm going to try and not repeat, but if I do, I apologize because there are some sort of overarching questions that reach on many other policies. But as far as small businesses are concerned, I think the most urgent anti-displacement strategy we need is to have comprehensive public policy to actually prevent displacement. Not only making sure that new small businesses can be set up, but the existing small business structure is hemorrhaging as we speak. We know what happened, the tragic story of Sabah Ethiopian Cuisine that got economically evicted by a corporate developer who has actually maxed out to my opponent. So the lines are really clearly drawn. Who's oppressed and who's the oppressor? It's really important to know which side to be on, and that's why we need to organize small businesses, which we are starting to do, to win commercial rent control, to win small business relocation assistance, and to win just cause protections for small businesses. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question again? Oh yes, I know, I remember. And we also need to greatly expand public sector unionized jobs, living wage jobs, with priority hire and apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. But this will remain a pipe dream unless we actually know how to fund it. So that's why the starting point for many of these questions that we're discussing is, will we have a council next year that will have the courage to tax big business? And if we have enough progressive revenues, then we can fund a massive project of, it's really a public works program of expanding publicly owned high quality social housing and the Green New Deal to expand public transit and energy retrofitting. All of this is related to this question directly because it will expand thousands of public sector unionized living wage jobs and priority hire and apprenticeship programs. This can be done. Again, we need political courage, and that can only be built through building grassroots coalitions.
Thank you.
As I've heard Joaquin talk about before, the black community has not been able to participate in the mainstream economy, has been locked out from many of those levers of opportunity that exist. And so when you saw Seattle have this unprecedented prosperity, this unprecedented growth, what happened? The black community actually got smaller and there was displacement. So this is all about opportunity. What if 10 years ago we had provided a chance for black kids to actually have a chance to learn about the tech industry, to have mentorship and training, so that instead of bringing in people that live somewhere else in the country to fill those jobs, that we could have just used the workforce that's already here in our city, in our district, in order to fill those jobs with really high-paying jobs, actually. So that's something we need to be thinking about now, is how do we provide opportunity? What are those pathways for opportunity? And it definitely exists in the tech industry. That's not going away. So how do we create those training programs? It also exists in spades with the construction industry. Sound Transit's going to have 60,000 jobs open up here real soon, construction jobs that pay really well. So how do we connect people to the apprenticeship programs so that they can actually get into those jobs? And if they're not living here right now, give them a salary so that they can actually come back in, so that we can grow the black population in the Central District and the South End again.
Thank you. Now is the time that you will be able to ask each one a question. To the sake of time, there's only 1 minute.
Yeah, so with all the meetings that you've missed, with all the time that you've been away on socialist alternative business in Europe, in on the East Coast, doing rallies, doing fundraisers, and I hear from people at the doors as well that your office doesn't call back, or when they call back, they're given a rant that has nothing to do with the actual issue that the person had called about in the first place. So with that sort of track record, why should you get promoted?
Well, I think in a way this is a trick question because the premise of the question is patently false. People may agree or disagree with the policies that I'm advocating for or my approach in building social movements. All of that is fair discussion. That's all up for debate, and I'm not shy of debate, and that's totally fine, and I don't claim to be infallible. I have learned a lot through my experience on being on city council and being an activist and a teacher myself. However, it's patently false to say that I don't show up. I work practically around the clock. My staff works practically around the clock. You may disagree with the policies because you're bankrolled by corporations that we are fighting against, but it's quite sad that we see immigrant women of color like me constantly being accused of being toxic, being told that I don't show up, that I don't do the work. We should not accept these, sort of these dog whistle, we should not accept these dog whistle ideas, and it's quite stunning that, look, the Seattle Times editorial board has an agenda. They hate what I stand for, and so they will repeat the lies. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. But why is somebody who claims to be transparent and accountable repeating what he knows to be lies? The stranger has clearly reported that this is a lie, that I have canceled half my needs. It's not true. But they will use lies when they don't agree with you. Black and brown communities have the experience of that. The civil rights movement was called divisive and was told that he was not using the right approach. MLK has had the same epithets hurled against him. So I'm in august company, I'm in honorable company when I hear big business and their spokespeople attacking me, but these are not based in truth. These are based in the fact that they represent interests that are contrary to the interests of ordinary people.
Now you can ask Mark a question.
Well, it's kind of related because, my opponent... You might as well be because you're standing for the same thing. How do you claim to be accountable and transparent when you have repeatedly recycled the lies that you know to be lies? When you, for example, not just about me, these are things that you have done in your own campaign. You applied for and interviewed for the corporate PAC. You thanked them right here actually at one of the candidate forums and said you're honored to have their support. And then you went around the district in the primary with posters saying no corporate PAC money. That's a lie. You sought the support of the corporate PAC. They emailed my campaign too, and I refused to apply for it because obviously I don't stand for corporations, I stand for ordinary people. And then later, not only did you post those posters in the entire district, then you told a reporter, this is a quote, I didn't realize the PAC had political positions. Imagine a political action committee not having political positions. I mean, is this credible? This PAC is being bankrolled by Amazon, by Uber and Lyft corporations that are exploiting the drivers that are right here with us in this audience. And you have also flip-flopped on answers depending on the audience and depending on what you think the audience wants to hear.
We want to make sure we get to your question.
You just very final. You flip-flopped on major questions like taxing big business, rent control. You say what the audience wants to hear, but what do you actually stand for? And how are you going to escape your corporate masters?
So, I've been a long-time small business owner. I've been the director of the Broadway Business Improvement Area for the last couple of years, where I advocate for our commercial corridors and our small businesses. I was the interim director of the Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce. My life has been really surrounded by work that relates to small businesses. And so, as a first-time candidate, I look at the Metropolitan Chamber, who has over 80% small businesses, and I say, does that reflect my values? Does that reflect the work that I've been doing? So, yes, we sought the endorsement of the Metropolitan Chamber, and I have to say, I am a little appalled, and you're going to think that this is disingenuous, but I tell you that it's the truth. And if I get onto council, you'll see that it's the truth by my actions. But I'm appalled by the level of money that special interests, whether they be the labor union PACs or big business or otherwise, how much they're pouring into this race. Because you know what? The people of District 3 are going to be able to decide on their own who they want to vote for. And that's why I'm proud that I've raised over 60% of my donations from within District 3, and over 90% from within the city of Seattle. Over 90% from within the city of Seattle. My opponent, it barely breaks 50% as far as percentage of contributions from within the city of Seattle, and only gets 25% of her donations from within the district itself. So if you want to look at who a person will serve, you look at their engagement in the community, you look at the people that are supporting them, the donations. We've gotten incredible support from our district, and those are the people, and those people only who I'm going to serve as city council member.
Okay, thank you. We are a little bit over time, but we wanted to give you guys, if you guys do have another question, it was kind of suggested from the audience, if you guys have one more question maybe to ask each other, and then we could take one question from the audience. If not, we could just take the question from the audience.
Let's hear from the audience.
Okay. Capacity building came up several times. The term is often used as a PC way of making grassroots, community-led organizations adopt white cultural values and norms. Often what we need isn't capacity, but equitable systems change. How would you work to implement equitable policy to affect systems change?
Yeah, and I think that this is one place at the city with our racial equity toolkit that every policy is put through. This is a place where we can improve that. It's in beta form right now, in my estimation. There's a lot of work that can be done on that. And that's work that can also be done with the community organizations, so they can chime in on what systems are working and what systems are not working. And I think that by building capacity, it does mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but essentially, I want to be able to help in whatever way, be an ally, lead follow actually your lead in the community to see how we can help you best enact policies, how to build capacity, how to build housing, how to connect the people in your community with opportunity, all these pieces. So as far as I consider the community piece at city government is to really support you and the good work that you're doing. But there's tools that we can use, like the racial equity toolkit, and the community can help improve those tools.
Because this question is about enacting systems change, and because it hasn't actually come up so far, but I think it's extremely important. I think one of the things we have to look at if we want to have a systematic shift in the society away from racism and different kinds of oppression, and not forcing communities of color to adopt white practices in sort of an insidious way, it has to start from the beginning of people's lives, which means what happens in schools. So taking systematic measures to address the school-to-prison pipeline, that means full funding of public schools and not by property taxes, which allows the school board to divide up, which schools get all the funds, which schools are going to be starved of funds. No, we have to have schools that are fully funded, but funded through progressive measures by taxing wealthy corporations and wealthy households, so that all children have opportunities. We need to systematically address the racial biases in schools and the disparities in discipline. And this also goes to police accountability. We need serious police accountability, and we need an independently elected oversight board that will have full powers over the police, including hiring, firing, and subpoena powers and policies and procedures. All of this needs to shift, and this is not going to be easy. I don't mean to sound like it's going to happen in a day. We will need real massive organizing, and we will need courageous community movements to achieve this, as we have seen already. And that's why I will be alongside many of you on Monday at the rally organized by the People's Party in memory of Atatiana Jefferson. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Let's take our candidates. We can't thank you all enough for coming out and showing up to this forum. I know that there are many, many forums happening throughout the city, and we are so thankful that you took the time to be with us tonight. So thank you all for coming, and thank all of you candidates for your amazing answers and questions.
We're done. We're out of here. But we do want to acknowledge our team. There's Omari Salisbury in the room, Curtis Calhoun, the people that work behind the scenes to help make this event. DQ, Dell. So Mari Salisbury, Africatown Media Network, Communications. So, Curtis Calhoun. All right, it's a big race. You guys know the presidential candidates is chiming in on our little neighborhood city council race, right? So it's a big deal. Yeah, it's a big deal. District 3 is a big deal right now. City council. Curtis Calhoun, y'all, behind the scenes, making it happen. All right. Hopefully you got to see candidates, differences, make their choice.
Every morning they wake up. They don't know what they're coming out. When the kids are done, somebody makes it, so everybody can go
I'm an urban economist. And so there's a lot of really cool initiatives that are happening in other cities that I'm curious to know about, but we don't know about, and I would just really love about.
Then you can come back and be
Okay, because I was looking forward to meeting her because we've been. Okay, all right. You said I asked for her. Thank you. All right. All right, appreciate it.
Why is it suicide? Because when they say you always remember the first person you killed and the last person you killed. You're 19 and have your own Yeah, I'm not sure. Whenever you're done, you just let me know.